I have a confession to make. I have been trying so hard to forget what I saw, but now that Halloween is right around the corner again, all these memories resurfaced all of a sudden. I now know it was wrong to keep my mouth shut. But before I tell my husband about it, and later on the authorities, I want to get it off my chest anonymously. Maybe this will help me confessing to my loved ones. My son, I'll call him Sam for the sake of this story, is crazy about Halloween. Each year he dresses up as a zombie. Sam loves zombies. Last year he begged and pleaded with me to let him go trick-or-treating with his friends. I used to always come along, but that year, he wanted to go without adult supervision. Just him and his buddies. He was 10 years old at the time and pretty mature already. I was reluctant at first, but after thinking it over for a while, I approved. We live in a friendly rural neighborhood bordering on large cornfields. Everyone knows everyone. I figured that they would be fine. The kid needed his freedom after all. Plus, his friend Amy would come along as well. She was 12 years old already and always reminded her younger friends to behave. However, one last glimpse of uncertainty within me caused me to decide that I would sneakily follow them to keep an eye on Sam from a distance without bothering him. Just to be absolutely safe. I did as planned, and on Hallows Eve, I let my son put on his costume and painted him some spooky zombie makeup, complete with sprinkles of fake blood on his ripped clothing and smears of it around his mouth. He took a look into the mirror and let out a squeal of delight. He hugged me, grabbed his little bag and rushed outside. I waited a bit before going outside myself. His father wasn't home that night, so I left a bowl of candy on the front porch in hopes of it not being raided immediately. Upon walking out the door, I saw Sam run towards a small group of other kids in fancy costumes. I recognized them all. There was Amy in her witch costume, our neighbor's son Mark was a vampire, and there was a ghost whom I could only assume was AL's best friend Blake. I smiled at the sweet sight. It was always the four of them. I followed them at a safe distance, trying not to catch their attention. I watched as they rang at the doors of several houses on their harvest, growing more and more cheerful the more candy they received. It was obvious that Amy wasn't too fond of AL's costume though. From time to time, my son would scare her by jumping in front of her all of a sudden or making creepy sounds. Amy would shriek loudly every single time before bursting out into laughter. At some point along the way, they began developing AL's zombie scares into a full-on game of catch, my son merrily chasing around the others who, happily giggling, tried to avoid him. It was adorable to watch them play. I knew they weren't little anymore, but it still warmed my heart. They had reached the end of the main road and were still playing catch. They were enjoying themselves and I was content, until Amy suddenly ran off into the cornfield to the side of the road. Al, Mark and Blake followed her, howling like little monsters along the way. I was taken aback. The cornfields were large and children, or rather residents of our neighborhood in general, were forbidden from entering it. Not because they would trample the corn, but because people had gotten lost in there before. I couldn't help but instantly get worried. I hurried to run after them, but seeing as I was in pretty bad shape, it took me a while to find them. When I finally caught up with them, I found that they had gathered at the side of the field. Amy was still chuckling but completely out of breath. "Give me a second, you guys," she panted. Come on," Blake argued from under his white cloak. "Playing zombie is so much fun," Sam cheered. In the heat of the game, he had completely given up on his usual calm demeanor, and was losing himself in a fit of giggles. "Can we keep playing zombie? Please." "Yeah, just give me a second, guys," Amy repeated. She was still bent over and trying to catch her breath. Suddenly, the three boys stuck their heads together and began murmuring something amongst themselves, out of earshot from Amy. "What? What are you talking about?" the young girl asked. "We're playing zombie for real this time," my son exclaimed. I frowned in confusion, but stayed where I was. I watched as Blake and Mark strode towards Amy and grabbed her by the arms. "It's okay, They're just trying to scare her again, I told myself. But that notion was quickly knocked out of me when Sam suddenly picked up a large stone from the dusty ground, his skinny arms struggling to lift the heavy thing. Slowly, at a pace almost menacing, he made his way over to Amy. I wanted to intervene. I wanted to dash out of my hiding spot and stop him, tear that rock put of his hands. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Tears began welling up in my eyes and running down my cheeks as my mouth dropped open, trying to form sounds, to somehow produce the shriek I was hoping for but to avail. I tried to move, I tried so hard, but I just couldn't. My body didn't obey me. I watched in horror as my son lifted the rock above his head and brought it down on the screaming, struggling girl's head. He did it again. Then again. Then again. My son, my child, my flesh and blood, bashed his friend's skull in. Blood was gushing everywhere. Onto my son's hands, his face, his costume. Sam let go of the stone and knelt down and fumbled around in the remains of Amy's head. I felt the vomit rise in my throat when I realized what he was doing. I remained paralyzed with fear, terror and disgust as my son carefully picked at the bloodied, gory mess and slowly led bits of Amy's brains to his mouth. One by one they vanished in between his lips like trick-or-treat candy. I didn't stay to watch Mark and Blake join him. When I finally regained control over my body, I simply turned and ran. I ran all the way back home, tears of shock still gushing out of my eyes. I barely made it into the bathroom before I started vomiting. When Sam came home later that evening, I didn't come out to greet him. I wouldn't have dared to look into his eyes. I wouldn't have been able to. I haven't been able to look at him the same way ever since. I don't know why he did such a thing. Was it my fault? Where did I go wrong? How did my sweet little boy turn into a monster? I've pretended that everything was fine for almost a whole year now. Every time I would run into Mark's or Blake's parents on my way around town, every time I would pick up my son from school, I pretended I never saw what I saw. They found Amy's corpse the day after Halloween. The police never found out who had done it, otherwise, I wouldn't be writing this right now. No suspects were ever arrested either. When they questioned my son, he lied through his teeth. Amy's parents moved away not long after. They couldn't stand being in that home in which they had made so many memories with their daughter. I know I should have told the police, and I hate myself for being too weak to do the right thing. I was scared. Scared of my own son, but at the same time scared of losing him too. I hate myself for not helping Amy. I don't know why I was unable to move, but had I been able to, if I could trade my life for hers, she would be standing here right now. I wish Halloween 2018 had never happened. It has left my son a killer, a sweet young girl dead, and me a guilt-stricken shell of my former self. I'm not stupid. I know that withholding information from the police in a case of child murder has severe legal consequences. I deserve everything that's coming to me. But so does he. I guess I thought telling the truth wouldn't make a difference. It wouldn't bring Amy back to life. But by now I know that those were just the cowardly, foolish thoughts of a cowardly and foolish woman. I know it's way too late, but for once I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to use the blood-stained costume as evidence. I never disposed of it. They're going to figure out which stains are Amy's and which are fake blood, alright. I'm going to name Mark and Blake too. The town of Loomsville was known for its peculiar traditions, but none as eerie as the annual Halloween hourglass exchange. Every resident received an hourglass on Halloween night, and legend had it that by the time the last grain of sand fell, something terrible would happen. Lila, a young journalist, had recently moved to Loomsville. She was skeptical of the town's superstitions and decided to document the hourglass exchange for her YouTube channel. This will be a fun way to debunk the myth, she thought. On Halloween night, as the clock struck 12, there was a knock on Lila's door. An old woman, draped in a tattered black cloak, stood outside. Her eyes were milky white, and she held an ornate hourglass filled with shimmering sand. "For you," she whispered, handing the hourglass to Lila. Lila examined it, intrigued by its craftsmanship. The sand inside was unlike any she had seen before. It glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. She thanked the woman and closed the door, setting up her camera to record the hourglass. Hours passed, and the sand slowly trickled down. Lila occasionally checked on it, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She laughed at the town's superstition, thinking it was all just a clever ruse to scare newcomers. But as the final grains began to fall, Lila felt a sudden chill in the air. The lights in her house flickered, and a soft whisper echoed through the walls. "Time is running out," it hissed. Panicking, Lila grabbed her camera and began to record. "This can't be real," she muttered, trying to calm herself. But the whisper grew louder, and shadows danced across the walls. The last grain of sand was about to fall. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and the old woman from earlier stood there, her milky eyes now glowing with a fiery intensity. "You didn't believe," she crooned, her voice dripping with malice. "Now you must pay the price." Lila backed away, her heart pounding. "What do you want?" she cried. The old woman grinned, revealing a mouth full of sharp, jagged teeth. "Your time," she whispered. Lila felt a force pulling her towards the hourglass. She tried to resist, but it was too strong. As she was drawn closer, the hourglass began to glow brighter, and the sand started to rise, flowing upwards. Suddenly, Lila found herself inside the hourglass, trapped in a world where time moved in reverse. She watched in horror as the events of the night played backward, from the old woman's visit to her own arrival in Loomsville. Desperate to escape, Lila searched for a way out. She noticed that the sand, when touched, seemed to ripple and shift. Taking a deep breath, she dove into the sand, swimming through the grains as if they were water. After what felt like hours, Lila emerged from the hourglass, gasping for breath. She was back in her living room, the camera still recording. The old woman was gone, and the hourglass lay shattered on the floor. Lila quickly turned off the camera, her hands shaking. She had escaped the hourglass's curse, but at what cost? The town's legend was true, and she had been its latest victim. But as she reviewed the footage, Lila noticed something strange. The video showed her entire ordeal, from the old woman's visit to her escape from the hourglass. But there was one crucial difference. In the video, the old woman was not an old woman at all. It was Lila, aged and withered, warning her younger self of the dangers of the hourglass. Horrified, Lila realized the truth. The old woman was her, from a future where she had been trapped in the hourglass for decades. She had come back to warn her past self, but in doing so, had set the events in motion all over again. The twist was clear. Lila was trapped in a never-ending loop, doomed to relive the same night over and over again. And as the clock struck 12 once more, there was another knock on the door. Lila hesitated, then slowly approached, knowing who awaited her. She opened the door to see her younger self, wide-eyed and curious, ready to experience the horrors of the hourglass exchange for the first time. And so, the cycle continued. In a secluded hamlet nestled within the ominous cliffs of the Scottish Highlands, a tale of horror was birthed on October 13, 1966. The village, founded upon a sinister act of murder, was enveloped by a malice aura that would linger, haunting its inhabitants through generations, with the dark past refusing to be buried. Ironically, despite the horrific origins, the anniversary of the atrocity became a cause for celebration, albeit with a shudder and a glance over one's shoulder. October of this year heralds a peculiarly dark centenary, a century marred by enigma, conjecture, and remembrance. Two individuals bear the weight of this dark history, one, the original perpetrator, and the other, a journalist named Edward McAllister. Edward, a scribe for the Edinburgh Chronicle in the early 1920s, developed a morbid fascination with occult-related homicides. When whispers of a ghastly family murder in a distant hamlet reached the Chronicle, Edward was dispatched to delve into the abyss. His arrival cast an unsettling shadow upon the hamlet, a darkness forged by the blood of an innocent family. His inquiries, while unearthing the vile nature of the murders, also sowed seeds of suspicion and dread among the villagers. His relentless pursuit of the dark truths, though perhaps well-intended, tore open a wound in the hamlet that no amount of prayer could heal. Instead, his probing seemed to pry open the very gates of hell itself. Only 3 souls bore witness to the original crime scene: Constable William O'Donnell, his assistant, Robert McTavish, and a shepherd from an adjacent field. The inquiry was hastily concluded within 48 hours, the records sealed in an impenetrable shroud of silence. Constable O'Donnell, when pressed, remained stoically silent, his visage morphing into a mask of haunted despair. Only under the threat of expulsion from his position did he finally speak, delivering a chilling account before resigning with immediate effect. The MacLeod family met their demise at the hands of the patriarch. The family of 5, including 3 young children, were subjected to a brutality too horrific for public revelation. The crime, steeped in the occult, was perceived as the act of a man unable to vanquish his inner demons, haunted by his experiences in a distant war. A tragedy for the innocent family, O'Donnell dubbed it a victory for the devil. Edward's article, Halloween's Dark Embrace, unveiled the macabre details to the hamlet. Mary MacLeod and her children, Angus, Isla, and Neil, were discovered in a grotesque tableau, severely charred, with their left hands over their eyes and right hands muffling their mouths. Burlap masks, with hollow eyes and mouths, obscured their faces. Positioned to form the initial 4 lines of a pentagram, Duncan MacLeod, the final line, lay atop his family, his mask devoid of openings. Symbols charred into the earth around them were later identified by Edward as occult, intended to invoke dark entities, perhaps even Satan himself. The revelation was harrowing to the villagers, but further details elicited even greater horror. Upon removing Duncan's mask, the word Halloween was found carved into his face, his mouth and eyes sewn shut, and "I am among you" etched across his chest. Edward concluded that the devil was indeed present, celebrating Halloween. The hamlet spiraled into chaos. Once a serene haven, it became a restless pit of despair. Word of the Halloween murders permeated beyond its borders, drawing those who sought communion with the beyond, hoping to genuflect before their demonic idols. Rituals, seances, and sacrifices became commonplace, a shrine erected at the site, all in homage to Halloween. Eventually, the villagers could no longer deny the unfolding horror. Faith crumbled, churches emptied, and Pastor Alastair, abandoning his flock, led many to declare the death of God. A new, dark truth emerged, insidiously capturing hearts, its acceptance nearly universal. Embracing the influx of visitors, the hamlet adapted. Shops and inns expanded, celebrations and parades were organized, and Halloween became the sole focus of communal life, its malevolence becoming almost palatable. No aspect of the hamlet was spared. Sympathetic individuals were elected to governance, petitions circulated, and discussions ensued. The council, in unanimous agreement, declared a new identity. They were now the hamlet of Halloween. And so, it served me well. Perhaps I should have revealed my own disposition earlier. Allow me to elucidate. Although I seldom insert myself into tragic tales, I have become entwined with this hamlet's dark fate. In the years following the MacLeod family's demise, through a convoluted lineage, I inherited the accursed property. Initially content to let it decay into oblivion, I was compelled to preserve its remnants for what I deemed historical significance. Regularly visiting the house, which had significantly decayed by the 1920s, I mended, restored, and painted, working through inclement weather until its former state was resurrected. I then penned a letter to Edward, and awaited his arrival. Upon his visit, I welcomed him. He scrutinized the interior with journalistic zeal, noting its details. His inquiries were innocuous, pertaining to the house's history and craftsmanship. We traversed each room until reaching the sole closed door at the rear. He requested entry, and I hesitated. Initially, I denied him, citing unfinished work and a desire to present it at its best to a detail-oriented reporter. All fabrications. I knew precisely what lay behind the door, having prepared it for this very moment. I had invited him for this purpose. The room, while authentic to the house, did not belong within its walls, nor in this world. Contrary to belief, I did not create it. It was always present. I merely prepared it for the next to join, and Edward was chosen. I permitted him entry. He grasped the handle, but it resisted. I reached out, and it yielded easily. We entered, and the door sealed behind us. Edward inhaled deeply, surveying the room. A shrine, adorned with a golden pentagram and a crystal goat's head, stood at the rear, while the faint breath of a beast whispered around us. Fear morphed into a smile on his face as he tilted his head forward, peering at me. "I am here," he uttered. "You are," I affirmed. We proceeded to the foyer, where I expressed gratitude for his visit and bid him farewell. He knew his task. In the ensuing weeks, Edward penned his series of articles, and visitors began to flock to the house, which I had transformed into a museum. As curator, I guided groups through the Halloween murder tour, starting in the foyer and concluding at the family's burial site in the yard. I narrated the tale they craved, of a man who, in a final surrender to malevolence, sacrificed his family and himself to evil, sparing no gruesome detail. For nearly 5 decades, I conducted these tours, never once revealing the room, the pulsating heart of the house. The centennial Halloween is imminent, and I am both relieved and apprehensive, weary yet ready for my repose. Before I can rest, however, a matter demands resolution. He desires release. He desires freedom, and I can no longer restrain him. The walls pulsate with the anticipation of a caged beast. I hear the voices of lost souls echoing through the walls, screams of agony and torment, the gnashing of teeth. The devil is here, ready to celebrate this Halloween. As midnight strikes and the clock bells toll, the clawing at the door ceases. The moment has arrived. I approach the door, gripping the scalding handle, and it creaks open, revealing an abyssal darkness. A trinity of eyes, large and red with horizontal slits, materializes in the rear of the room. Steam emanates from his nostrils as he breathes with the lungs of an oxen, blood dripping from his teeth as he takes a deep, guttural breath. "Joseph, my lost soul! You are dismissed," he growls. As I turn and somberly proceed to the door, I hear hoofs pounding rhythmically across the aged wooden floor as he steps into the hallway behind me. The back door swings open, and I turn around. Towering as tall as the pillars of hell, he reaches skyward, unleashing a primal howl that propels me through the doorway. The house's windows explode. The ground begins to quake. I watch as the house begins to collapse, room by room, folding into itself. A fire erupts from the ground below, rapidly consuming the remnants. The entire structure begins to rotate and levitate, reducing to the size of a boulder through progressive folding. A singularity forms from the spinning mass, taking a familiar shape. The 5 points of the golden pentagram are all that remain, ablaze, suspended above the ground. The earth opens beneath, revealing the dungeons of hell, brimming with lost and tortured souls. Human organs adorn the walls, oozing with blood and teeth. A powerful wind develops, pulling me toward the gate to hell. I resist, clinging to a concrete gravestone protruding from the ground. The golden pentagram is swallowed by the earth, and hell is sated as the gate closes and the ground steadies beneath my feet. My sentence is complete. I slip beneath the earth, crawling into my coffin, folding my arms across my chest. I close my eyes and sleep, The gravestone above tells the world of my shame, though I am an innocent man.